Man, Zap was ahead of their time when they talked about computer love, because in this day and age, everyone wants to work remote, it seems like. It's like, how can I leverage the digital age and work from my pajamas? Like, is that the dream? So let's talk about how you can build a world-class remote team. I am accompanied by my co-host here from the Big Money Movement team, Cheryl Parks, our lead coach and trainer, and Kelly Wasson, our director of operations. I would love to hear from you two. What are your thoughts on building a world-class remote team?
I think there's a strong emphasis on timing. So when it comes to building a team, you need to know when to hire. And a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners wait until they're in urgent desperation mode to hire, and then they typically miss-hire because they're desperate. But I love how I strongly suggest that as business owners, we hire proactively versus reactively, and that's very key.
How do you suggest that one might proactive hire? What does that look like?
It's all about sales forecasting. So we talked about that. We talked about sales forecasting earlier, and just knowing when it makes sense. Like, when do we have the revenue? What goals are we trying to hit? Whose role will it be to help us get to hit these vast goals? And I truly believe that sales forecasting will give us the best insight on when to hire.
I love that. When you think about a remote team, Cheryl, what do you think is critical to that?
So because my background is sales, I'm always just considering the acquisition of talent and then the placement in the appropriate places.
Okay.
So I've worked with a lot of salespeople over the years where they're in the wrong role. You have an appointment setter that's supposed to be building a long-term relationship. You have a long-term relationship builder that's tasked with making appointments every day, and it doesn't light them up, to use a term that I hear Kelly using all the time. So you want the role to be, the talent to be placed in the role properly so that you can optimize, optimize performance, optimize their energy, optimize the culture. Right? Because if everybody's excited about what they're doing, the culture's just going to be, it's going to be on fire. So,
we just had our coaching call today with the Big Money Movement team, and the exciting news is that, we serve women entrepreneurs who are looking to consult and land six-figure corporate clients. And with that, as they land these deals, they're like, I need to hire. I need to expand my team. And we talk a lot about just the implications of hiring, whether that's building a bench of contractors, whether that means hiring. And right now in today's day and age, we know that when you post an opportunity and say that it's remote, it's attractive. But there are implications of that as a business owner. So I know Kelly and I, Kelly leads our operations when it comes to hiring and talent. That's something that I'm always discussing with her. She's my boss on the matter. But one of the things is, while we were excited about building a remote workforce, there are some compliance things we need to consider. So, right now on our team, we have employees who are all over the U.S. We have contractors outside of the U.S., and there are real implications of that. Do you mind talking about that a little bit, Kelly, like those considerations?
Yes, we definitely have to look at the state level and the province level. We've got a team member that is in Canada and how we can just stay compliant with where they live. There's definitely different legal ramifications, so you want to take that into consideration when hiring remote team members. Some opt to hire remote team members, but locally, because they don't want to deal with the headache of knowing all 50 states policies. So it's very, very important to lean into.
I appreciate that. As when I was chief growth officer for a consulting firm and the executive coach that was hired for me, one of the things that he said to me, we were a remote team way before that was a popular thing. We were using Zoom before people knew what that was at the time. And we were talking about, we were a remote consulting firm, and we were running into some real challenges. At the time, I would say it was like a sorority, right? So there was some women who had worked for the organization for some time, they were cliquey, and then you'd have someone else you would hire who lived in a whole nother geographic area who was remote, and it just felt like all of these silos. And one of the things when I was talking to him, he talked about the importance of when your team shows up on Zoom, bring everyone on camera. Right, and he talked about because the risk, even though there's so many benefits, the risk is communication breakdowns. I can't tell you how many communication breakdowns we had because we hadn't met in person. We didn't know each other well enough. So if I send you a text, I have no clue how you're translating that. If I send you an email, you might translate that wrong. But if we have a practice of being on camera, and I'll never forget, I'm going to mess up the statistics, but he talked about the data that our brain needs to make decisions and how a lot of that comes from visual. So when you take away the visual cues, if I can't see your physiology or your behaviors, and when I'm communicating with you, I'm running blind and I might create my own narrative. And so I think there's inherent risk of remote teams when it comes to communication. Any thoughts that you all have to add on that? Like, you think there's pros and cons, or how do you manage that communication?
I think just in general, so two things. I think you have to over communicate.
Yes.
Anytime that you have any area compromised, as you just mentioned,
Yeah.
like, where somebody could come away with their own thoughts about it, you have to over communicate just to be sure that it's understood. And then the second piece is really active listening.
Right.
Sometimes you can have great conversations, you can have difficult conversations, but if the person's actually listening and understanding, like, this is how I feel about it, this is what I think about it, this is how I got to that area, this is my experience before.
Right.
Right? That you know nothing about, so I need to actually tell you what's going on. If you're actively listening, you start to understand, and you can share with the person that I get it, But I think that the active listening part, sometimes, like you said, the camera's clicked off on the Zoom call, and the other person's multitasking, right?
They're muted.
They're muted, and so they're half listening, and they maybe miss cues. You know what I mean? And so it's just key, I think, to really just be present. Right. It sounds simple, but it's not always simple to do.
And checking for understanding.
Yes.
Right, because I realize sometimes I will say something and someone will say, oh, this is what I heard. I'm like, oh, wait, no. Let me rewind. That's not the message that I was trying to convey. Or I'll really be intently listening to someone. And then when I translate what they say, they're like, no, you picked up the wrong cues. And so I think just the active listening, checking for understanding so you get that agreement, and then it's like, okay, we're on the same page.
And also with those touch points, I think it's important to be intentional about which types of touch points. All of the touch points with the remote sales team can't be quotas and benchmarks and sales forecasting and numbers. Some of them have to just be like really leaning into who the person is, who the team is, and building camaraderie as a sales team, I believe, is very, very important as well.
Yes, definitely.
It makes me think, I want to give kudos to Emmy, our program coordinator at the Big Money Movement. One of the things Emmy brought up that I hadn't thought about before, she said, the thing about being a remote team is I see you all at designated times. I will never run into you happenstance or spontaneously. It's always like, I see you at 4 o'clock because there's an agenda. I see you at 8 a.m. because there's an agenda, and we're doing boom, boom, boom. And she's like, whereas if we worked in person, I might bump into you for lunch, like we would just have these sporadic interactions. And so she was like, I miss that. And one of the things that we've instituted as a team is we have, like, in our Slack, we have what we call the water cooler channel. It's like, this ain't got nothing to do with nothing. Like, I'm just dropping memes, I'm dropping kids' photos. Like, those are random things that have nothing to do with the business agenda. It just gives us the space to say, I don't know where this fits, but I just want to bring my full self and just kind of build that camaraderie. And Emmy did an awesome job with that, so I want to give her credit. Opportunities for in-person. Just because the team's remote, does it have to stay remote? Do y'all want to talk about, like, planning for in-person events or things like that?
Our in-person events have been absolutely great. I think we know each other so much better. We can understand, just each other. We've sat in each other's space and shared nachos and did a toast, a physical toast, and it really does, like, bond us a little bit more. I absolutely love that.
We were having a conversation last night because we are a remote team, right? So we literally came together to record these videos for y'all because we love you so much. And we were just talking last night, and even being in each other's space, we've had some difficult conversations. And we talked about these difficult conversations are, I don't want to say easier to navigate, but they feel less combative being able to sit down together and talk about them versus if I had a difficult conversation and I sent you an audio message in a Slack channel or a written message. And so I do think when it comes to remote teams, you need to have a plan in place for how are you going to navigate complicated conversations or difficult conversations, because we're going to run into obstacles or misunderstandings as a team, and just that communication piece is so critical.
The planning for remote, and not just assuming for
Right.
remote. Yeah, because it's not a natural thing that we are disconnected. Humans typically naturally want connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely have to strategically plan how you're going to support to build and grow.
It makes me want to close out with words from one of our Big Money Movement alumni, Dion. Big ups to Dion. And Dion is an event planner, right? And so now she does hybrid events, virtual events, and in-person events. And she said the thing about going virtual is you can't take what you did in person and do it virtual. You have to rethink everything and make virtual work for what you're trying to do. And I think that's the same thing with remote teams. You can't take exactly what you were doing in person and translate it to remote. You have to rethink business as usual. And with that, let's go deeper in this conversation and talk about why sales forecasting is so important, because as Kelly said, that is really what needs to happen before you build your remote team. You really need to know how to forecast and know when it's time to hire remotely. Click that video. We'll see you there. Until next time, this is Liz, Kelly, and Cheryl.
Click the link.